Fake police confront a woman. What she does next exposes a shocking scam in her neighborhood. The sun hung lazily in the sky, scattering golden light across Maplewood Lane. Long, warm shadows stretched across neatly trimmed lawns, weaving through the swings of children playing and the scattered bicycles resting against white picket fences. The faint hum of conversation drifted from open windows, mingling with the occasional bark of a dog or the squeal of laughter from a cluster of children chasing a soccer ball down the sidewalk. It was the kind of afternoon that felt ordinary, almost serene, the comforting rhythm of suburban life unfolding without interruption. Amid the calm, she walked steadily, her steps measured but purposeful. Jamila Harris, a black woman in her early 30s, carried a brown paper bag of groceries in one hand, the faint rustle of crinkling wrapping echoing softly in the quiet street. Her posture was composed, her gaze alert, a subtle combination of ease and vigilance. Though nothing seemed out of place, Jamila's sharp eyes swept her surroundings, catching details others might have overlooked. The way a neighbor's shutters rattled slightly in the breeze, the glint of sunlight off a bicycle handlebar, or the flutter of a loose mailbox flag. She had walked this route countless times, the mundane familiarity of the afternoon offering a quiet comfort. The scent of freshly cut grass mixed with the faint aroma of dinner being prepared somewhere down the street. The rhythm of her steps matched the gentle cadence of life around her, a small, ordinary symphony of suburban existence. Yet, beneath the surface of normalcy, a subtle tension hummed faintly, almost imperceptible, but enough to prick the edges of her awareness. Her eyes flipped toward the corner of the street, catching sight of a car parked unusually close to a driveway. Two men sat inside, their posture stiff, the vehicle idling silently. At first glance, the uniforms they wore seemed official, dark jackets adorned with metallic badges, crisp trousers, polished shoes, but something was off. The jackets hung slightly too loosely, the badges tilted at odd angles, catching the sunlight in a way that seemed artificial. The men's glances were deliberate, calculating, yet something in the way they shifted their weight betrayed an unfamiliarity, a practiced performance rather than the natural ease of someone accustomed to authority. Jamila's grip tightened subtly on the paper bag, her fingers brushing the edges of the groceries, a grounding gesture. The calm of the afternoon seemed to hold its breath, the usual chorus of suburban sounds dimming ever so slightly as the presence of the parked car introduced an almost imperceptible note of unease. Though the street appeared unchanged, the children still laughing, the neighbors still chatting, the ordinary rhythm of the afternoon had been interrupted by this quiet anomaly, a whisper of something not quite right. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply observe, to catalog the details, the angle of the badges, the shifting shadows inside the car, the deliberate way the men avoided meeting her gaze directly. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else, yet to Jamila it was unmistakable, a quiet, unsettling signal that the ordinary afternoon she had expected might soon be disrupted. With a steadying breath, she continued her walk, her eyes never leaving the parked car, each step a delicate balance between routine and the faint, growing awareness that something unusual had quietly crept into her otherwise ordinary day. The car doors opened with a sharp metallic click, breaking the lazy rhythm of the afternoon. Jamila's eyes lifted, narrowing as the two men stepped out onto the sidewalk. Their movements were precise, calculated, almost rehearsed, each step a deliberate assertion of authority. One of them, taller and broad-shouldered, raised a badge toward her, glinting under the sunlight. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said in a tone meant to sound commanding yet polite. "You're in violation of local regulations." Jamila froze for a heartbeat, the grocery bag trembling slightly in her grasp. Confusion washed over her first. What regulations? She had lived on Maplewood Lane for years, followed every rule to the letter. Her mind scrambled for an explanation, her heart quickening beneath her calm exterior. The taller man stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement, and the other officer mirrored him, flanking her like predators closing in. A spark of fear flared, sharp and insistent, but beneath it, determination began to grow, a quiet, simmering resolve. Jamila squared her shoulders, refusing to let panic show on her face. She met the taller officer's gaze directly, her eyes steady, unflinching. Something about the way they carried themselves, the stiffness in their posture, didn't sit right. With her, it was too rigid, too forced. The commanding tone lacked the natural authority she had seen in real law enforcement. As they spoke, Jamila's observant eyes cataloged the inconsistencies. The fabric of their jackets looked cheap under the bright afternoon sun, the seams uneven, the collars slightly frayed. The metallic badges they brandished with such confidence were crooked, one tilted slightly to the left, the other catching the light at an unnatural angle. Their belts, meant to hold equipment, hung loosely, some of the pouches empty, some barely strapped. The taller officer's hand twitched nervously as he adjusted his badge mid-sentence, a subtle sign of insecurity that he tried and failed to mask. Her mind raced through possibilities, each observation deepening the unease settling in her chest. The vehicle behind them, a dark sedan parked too close to the curb, had a license plate that didn't match the local registration style. Jamila's instincts prickled, that quiet, insistent warning of danger mingled with curiosity. A tiny rustle caught her attention as one of the men bent slightly. She glimpsed a crumpled document fluttering near the passenger side door. The letters were faint but legible. HOA Police. Not the city enforcement she had expected. Jamila inhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around the paper bag, grounding herself in the familiar weight of groceries. Confusion and fear warred within her, yet the spark of determination flared brighter. She had faced challenges before, moments where appearances were deceiving and the world tried to intimidate her into compliance. This was no different. She would not be cowed. "Ma'am, step aside while we issue a citation," the taller officer commanded, his voice slightly strained, betraying the carefully constructed authority he was trying to project. Jamila held her ground. "I think you need to show me some identification," she said evenly, her voice steady despite the rapid beat of her heart. "Official ID, city issued, not whatever this is." She gestured subtly toward the crumpled document. The officer's eyes flickered, hesitation barely masked by a forced smile. He coughed, glanced at his partner, who shifted uneasily, glancing down at the mismatched plate, then back at Jamila. A bead of sweat traced the line of his temple. The facade of control wavered, almost imperceptibly, but enough for her keen senses to notice. Time seemed to stretch as Jamila waited, every detail etching itself into her memory, the stiffness of their stance, the uneven glint of their badges, the faint smell of leather, and something more acrid beneath their uniforms. The street around her remained oblivious, children laughing, neighbors chatting, but Jamila felt the undercurrent of tension, a silent pulse of danger threaded with opportunity. Her fear subsided slightly, replaced by clarity. These men were not what they claimed. Their performance, meticulously rehearsed yet flawed, revealed cracks for those willing to look closely. And Jamila was willing. As the taller officer straightened, adjusting his badge once more, Jamila's gaze sharpened. She knew that the ordinary afternoon she had expected was no longer entirely hers. Something unusual had entered her world, a challenge to her intelligence, courage, and composure. And she was ready. Jamila's fingers hovered over her phone, a small tremor betraying the rapid beat of her heart. She had learned long ago that fear could cloud judgment, and she refused to give it power. With a steadying breath, she tapped the record button. The soft click almost imperceptible over the quiet suburban hum. The camera lens captured everything, the crooked badges, the twitching hands, the faint sheen of sweat glimmering in the afternoon sunlight. Her mind, however, was sharper than ever, analyzing each movement, each word, each subtle hesitation. As the taller officer gestured toward her with a forced authority, Jamila recalled the countless articles and reports she had read on overreach and neighborhood scams. Her eyes, scanning for inconsistencies, noted the rehearsed cadence of their speech, the way their commands lacked the natural authority of trained law enforcement, and the tiny flaws in their presentation that anyone familiar with such schemes would immediately recognize. They were playing a role, a performance designed to intimidate, and she was seeing the cracks. Around her, the street maintained its casual rhythm. Children still kicked a ball across the pavement, and the scent of freshly baked bread drifted from an open window. Yet slowly, Jamila became aware of subtle shifts. A neighbor leaning over a railing, watching with cautious curiosity. Another peeking through a partially closed door, tension etched across his face. Her composure, quiet but unyielding, seemed to draw attention, and she realized she was no longer alone in this small theater of deception. There were witnesses, and in their eyes she could see the beginnings of concern, of solidarity. The emotional weight of the moment pressed on her shoulders, but instead of faltering, it steeled her resolve. The officer's attempts to maintain control grew increasingly strained. When she asked again for proper identification, their excuses grew thinner, their voices sharper, tinged with irritation. The shorter man's fingers brushed nervously against the crumpled document lying near the car, as though unsure whether to pick it up or leave it exposed. Jamila's sharp eyes caught the partial words printed in faded ink. HOA Police. Not the city authority they claimed to represent. A quiet thrill of vindication mingled with wariness. She had expected this to be more straightforward, yet the layers of deceit were more elaborate than she had imagined. Her gaze flicked to the taller officer, who suddenly adjusted his crooked badge again, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture that betrayed both insecurity and calculation. The pattern was emerging, small, deliberate signals hidden in plain sight. Jamila's pulse steadied as she catalogued each detail, each nuance. She realized that these men were attempting to manipulate fear itself, but she had already anticipated the choreography. Then, a faint movement at the edge of her vision caught her attention. A neighbor, previously hidden behind a tree, stepped forward silently, extending a plain envelope toward her. Jamila's heart leapt, a mixture of surprise and gratitude washing over her. Without a word, she accepted it, slipping it discreetly into her jacket pocket. A subtle message of trust, a quiet reinforcement that she was not alone in this confrontation. Opening her phone again, she shifted slightly, angling the camera to ensure the dropped document and the officer's behavior were captured. She spoke softly, more to herself than to anyone else, articulating observations and inconsistencies. Mismatched license plate, crooked badges, no proper documentation. Clearly not real police. Her calm voice contrasted sharply with the tension radiating from the two men, whose composure began to fray as the realization sank in that this woman, alone but unafraid, had recognized their deception. The afternoon sun continued its slow descent, casting long shadows over the street, illuminating each detail with harsh clarity. Jamila's determination radiated outward, a quiet defiance that seemed to bend the ordinary suburban air around her. Each clue had revealed itself in sequence, guiding her toward the truth. The fake officers, once confident, now seemed exposed and vulnerable, as though the careful illusion they had crafted was unraveling thread by thread under her unwavering scrutiny. In that moment, Jamila understood something profound. Vigilance, composure, and observation could transform fear into power. Every subtle inconsistency, every dropped document, every silent gesture from a neighbor had become a piece of a puzzle that, once assembled, revealed the full extent of the deceit she faced. And as the officers fidgeted, unsure and exposed, She knew that the stage was set for the confrontation that would soon follow, a confrontation that would not only reveal the truth, but also underscore the courage and intelligence required to stand firm in the face of injustice. Jamila's steady gaze never wavered, even as the taller officer leaned closer, attempting to assert dominance with every carefully rehearsed gesture. The air grew thick with tension, the quiet suburban street feeling suddenly claustrophobic. Her phone camera hummed softly, recording every movement, every strained word, but she knew she couldn't rely solely on technology. She had to stay vigilant, reading their intent, predicting their next move. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, a sound broke through the crunch of footsteps on gravel, firm and deliberate. Jamila's head turned just in time to see a figure emerging from the shade of a nearby oak tree. An older man, dressed in a weathered jacket and carrying a small notebook, walked with the calm authority of someone accustomed to command. The officers stiffened, their confident facade faltering as recognition or perhaps fear flickered across their faces. The newcomer spoke clearly, his voice carrying both warmth and authority. "Afternoon, folks. Let's clarify a few things." He nodded at Jamila briefly, a silent acknowledgement that he had seen what she had done, the observation, the subtle questioning, the composure in the face of deception. Jamila's heart lifted, relief mingling with cautious optimism. She wasn't alone. The taller officer's face paled, and Jamila noticed something she hadn't before, the shorter officer's hands trembling ever so slightly. In that moment, the truth began to unravel. The older man approached, glancing at the documents near the car. His eyes narrowed as he read the crumpled page with police stamped on it. Then, with a subtle gesture, he revealed what Jamila had only begun to suspect. One of the fake officers was not just an imposter, but a former corrupt city officer seeking redemption. The revelation struck Jamila with a mix of surprise and fascination. The man she had instinctively judged as part of the threat was quietly aiding in its unraveling. With careful words and discreet signals, he began guiding the exposed officer to cooperate, explaining the scope of the scam in hushed tones. Jamila listened intently, her pulse quickening with both excitement and disbelief. The deception wasn't confined to her street, it extended across multiple neighborhoods. A sophisticated scheme exploiting fear of HOA penalties to extract bribes and intimidate residents. As the details unfolded, the two fake officers shifted uncomfortably, caught between fear and complicity. The former corrupt officer's presence had upended their confidence. Jamila felt a surge of vindication, an intoxicating blend of relief and pride. Her intuition, her attention to detail, her calm analysis had drawn the right people to intervene. She had seen the cracks in their act before anyone else could, and now the truth was blossoming, undeniable in public. Neighbors peeked from doorways and porches, their curiosity now tempered with admiration. Some whispered to one another, their eyes wide with the understanding that the woman they had watched from a distance was not just courageous, she was brilliant, capable of dismantling a complex scheme with nothing but observation, reasoning, and composure. Jamila's hands, which had been gripping the grocery bag tightly, relaxed slightly as the scam's full scale became evident. Relief surged through her, yet it was mixed with awe, not just at the intelligence of the retired officer, but at her own ability to navigate danger, detect deception, and act decisively. The street, once ordinary, now felt like the stage for a quiet triumph. The sunlight that fell across the asphalt and trimmed hedges seemed almost celebratory, casting the familiar surroundings in a new triumphant light. In that moment, Jamila understood the profound truth. Bravery and intellect, combined with calm determination, could dismantle even the most carefully orchestrated lies. She had faced fear and deception, and through observation, courage, and the guidance of an unexpected ally, she had emerged not just unscathed, but victorious. Jamila took a deep breath, her mind razor-sharp and her pulse steady. The retired officer's subtle nod had given her the silent confirmation she needed. This was her moment not of fear, but of authority. With the phone still recording, she stepped forward, positioning herself in the middle of the street, where the afternoon sun painted her in warm, golden light. Shadows stretched long across the asphalt, but her posture was unyielding, each movement deliberate, radiating calm power. "Everyone, please listen," she said, her voice clear and firm, carrying naturally over the soft murmurs of neighbors gathering at their doorways and fences. "These men are not what they claim to be. They are not law enforcement. And they have been attempting to intimidate residents across our neighborhood for personal gain." Her words seemed to slice through the tension in the air. The taller officer's eyes flickered toward the recording on her phone, the crumpled HOA police documents, and the watchful faces of the neighbors. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but Jamila continued without hesitation. She displayed the phone screen to those watching, zooming in on the badges and license plate, highlighting the inconsistencies she had cataloged so meticulously. The short officer shifted nervously, hands fidgeting as the scale of exposure became undeniable. One neighbor, emboldened by her composure, stepped forward, offering a brief, corroborating statement about the officer's unusual behavior and the envelope of evidence she had received. Another mentioned suspicious visits in other parts of the community, connecting the dots of the scam Jamila had begun to uncover. Each witness added a layer of credibility, a subtle chorus of truth that rendered the imposter's authority null. The retired officer approached, quietly explaining to the neighborhood crowd that the scam extended beyond Maplewood Lane, affecting multiple districts and exploiting fear of HOA penalties. His presence lent weight to her words, a tangible reinforcement that this was not merely one woman's perception, but an orchestrated, audacious fraud. The fake officer's facade wavered under the combined scrutiny of evidence, witnesses, and the observant, unflinching gaze of the woman they had hoped to intimidate. Jamila held her ground, unshaken as the men's composure crumbled. The taller officer stammered, eyes darting toward the exit, realizing the performance of authority they had relied on for so long had finally failed. The shorter officer, pale and visibly shaking, glanced at his partner, then at Jamila, and finally, with a reluctant nod, turned away, retreating toward the car. Their retreat was silent, hurried, each step heavy with humiliation. As the impostors disappeared from view, a quiet wave of murmurs rippled through the gathered neighbors. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, applause broke out, clapping hands, nodding heads, whispers of admiration. Jamila's shoulders relaxed slightly, and a faint smile touched her lips. She stood tall, framed by the late afternoon sun, its rays glinting off the edges of her hair and casting a warm glow across her face. There was no boastfulness, no arrogance, only the serene confidence of someone who had faced deception, fear, and uncertainty, and emerged triumphant. The children, still curious, peeked from behind fences and playgrounds, their eyes wide as they witnessed a quiet form of heroism. Neighbors began sharing stories, connecting incidents they had dismissed or overlooked until now, all forming a larger picture that confirmed Jamila's observations. The street, once ordinary and mundane, had transformed into a stage for courage and justice, illuminated by sunlight and human attention. Jamila's gaze swept across the neighborhood, taking in the small, supportive gestures, a nod, a quiet smile, a whispered "thank you." Each acknowledgement reinforced the lesson of the day. Vigilance, intelligence, and moral courage could dismantle even the most carefully orchestrated deceit. Her victory was not only personal, but communal, a reminder that standing firm in truth, with composure and clarity, could inspire others to act and to recognize justice when it revealed itself. As she finally turned to continue her walk home, the sun slanting low behind her, Jamila carried with her a quiet sense of fulfillment. The impostors were gone, the truth was laid bare, and her community had witnessed the power of observation, courage, and resolve. The ordinary afternoon had been transformed into a moment of triumph, a testament to what it meant to confront fear with clarity and integrity. The quiet street of Maplewood Lane slowly returned to its usual rhythm, yet the afternoon air felt different, now charged with a subtle, lingering sense of awareness. Neighbors emerged from doorways and porches, speaking in hushed tones that gradually grew into animated discussions. Their voices carried curiosity, concern, and finally, understanding. They spoke of the unusual events that had unfolded, piecing together observations from their own experiences, realizing that the threat had been larger than any single household. Vigilance, they now agreed, was not just a necessity, it was a communal responsibility. Jamila stood at the edge of her front yard, her groceries long set aside, watching quietly as neighbors shared stories of subtle intimidation they had once dismissed. Some admitted they had felt unsure, powerless even, when confronted with official-looking figures claiming authority. Others expressed relief, gratitude, and admiration, recognizing that it had taken intelligence, composure, and courage to uncover the truth. Slowly, she saw the community beginning to knit itself together with a new sense of unity, forged in the shared acknowledgement that knowledge and awareness could guard against deception. Children who had played nearby earlier now watched from a safe distance, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and curiosity. They had witnessed a woman, ordinary in appearance yet extraordinary in action, confront fear and manipulation with nothing but her wits, composure, and determination. Jamila's figure, framed by the fading golden sunlight, seemed almost emblematic, a symbol of quiet strength and moral integrity. She did not raise her voice in triumph. She did not boast or claim victory. Yet every small nod of acknowledgement, every glance of respect, affirmed her impact. The retired officer, still present but now more relaxed, spoke quietly to a few neighbors about the broader implications of the scam. He emphasized that what had occurred on their street was just a fragment of a larger pattern, a reminder that vigilance and critical thinking were necessary everywhere, not just within one small community. His words reinforced Jamila's example. Courage and knowledge, combined, could illuminate deceit and restore justice. As the sun dipped lower, casting long amber shadows across manicured lawns and white picket fences, Jamila felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had acted not for recognition, but for truth, for integrity, and for the safety of her community. The lessons of the day were already settling into the minds of those around her. Awareness, careful observation, and the courage to act when confronted with deception were now etched into the shared consciousness of the neighborhood. Her own reflection, mirrored in the smiles and quiet nods of her neighbors, reinforced a truth she had always known but now had witnessed unfold on a public stage. True strength is not measured by fearlessness, but by the ability to stand firm in truth, even when the world conspires to deceive. It was in the steady gaze, the calm decision-making, and the refusal to yield to intimidation that real power lay. Jamila took a slow, deep breath, letting the warm evening light wash over her. The ordinary street had transformed into a living testament to courage, integrity, and the quiet power of human intelligence. And as she walked the short distance to her home, the voices of neighbors still buzzing in thoughtful conversation behind her, one truth resonated above all else: standing firm in truth, with knowledge, vigilance, and moral conviction, could not only protect oneself, it could inspire an entire community. The afternoon had ended as it began, under the same warm sun, yet everything felt irrevocably changed. Maplewood Lane had witnessed a quiet heroism that would linger far beyond the setting light, a reminder that courage, intelligence, and integrity could shine brightest in the most ordinary of places. True strength lies not in fearlessness, but in standing firm for truth when the world tries to deceive you.